Hello, Ka-Edu! Here is an episode for Great Books for Module 3, The Short Story. What is a short story? A short story is a form of brief fictional work usually written in prose. The earliest examples of short stories can be found in the oral storytelling tradition as well as the episodes of ancient Mediterranean epics like the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Homer's Iliad. Other examples also include anecdotes, fables, fairy tales, and parables. Aesop's fables may have been the first anthology of short stories in Western literature in the 4th century BC. A short story is a fictional work of prose that is shorter in length than a novel. In his essay, The Philosophy of Composition, Edgar Allan Poe said that a short story should be read in one setting and focuses on one plot, one main character with few additional characters, and one central theme. What are the elements of a short story? Number 1. Characters. Every story needs characters. Your protagonist is your main character, and they are the primary character interacting with the plot and the conflict. You might have multiple protagonists or secondary protagonists. An antagonist works against your main character's goal to create conflict. Most short stories have several characters. Number 2. Setting. Your story must take place somewhere. Setting is where and when the story takes place, the physical location and time period. Some stories have only one setting, while others have several settings. Setting also includes time periods. This might be a year or an era. You can be less specific in your time period, like modern day or near future, but it is still an important component of your setting. Number 3. Theme. Think of theme as the why behind the story. What is the big idea? Why did the author write this story? And what message are they trying to convey? Some common themes in stories include good versus evil, love, life, success, and others. Themes can also be warnings, such as the dangers of seeking revenge or the effects of war. Sometimes, themes are social criticisms of class, race, gender, or religion. Number 4. Tone. Tone might be the most complicated of all the story elements. Tone is the overall feeling of your story. A mystery might be foreboding. A women's literature story might feel nostalgic. A romance may have an optimistic, romantic tone. Tone should fit both your genre and your individual story. Create tone with writing elements such as word choice, sentence length, and sentence variety. Aspects of the setting, such as the weather, can contribute to tone as well. Number 5. Point of view. Every story needs a point of view. This determines whether we're seeing something from the narrator's perspective or a character's perspective. There are 4 main points of view in creative writing and literature. First person tells the story from a character's perspective using first-person pronouns such as I, me, my, mine, we, our, ours. The POV does not have to be from the perspective of the main character. For example, in F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, the narrator Nick is mostly an observer and participant in Gatsby and Daisy's story. Rarely, stories are written in second person, you, yours. This point of view is more common in short stories than novellas or novels. Fan fiction and choose-your-own-adventure stories use second person more often than traditional creative writing does. The third person limited can be used to show the story through the eyes of one character. This point of view uses third person pronouns such as he, him, his, her, hers, their, theirs. If your story features alternating points of view, third person limited only shows one character's perspective at a time. First person and third person limited points of views are sometimes referred to as deep POV. If the story is told from the narrator's perspective, the POV is typically third person omniscient. Omniscient means all-knowing. The narrator sees all and knows all. Number 6. Conflict. Conflict is a problem that drives a story's plot forward. The conflict is what is keeping your characters from achieving their goals. There are internal conflicts in which the character must overcome some internal struggle. There are also external conflicts that the character must face. There are 7 major types of conflict in literature. They are man versus man versus nature, man versus society, man versus technology, man versus supernatural, man versus fate, and man versus self. Number 7. Plot. The plot is the series of events that occur in a story. It's the beginning, middle, and end. It's easy to confuse conflict and plot. Plot is what happens, while conflict is the thing standing in the way of different characters' goals. The two are inextricably linked. Plot is one of the 7 elements of a story, but there are also different elements of plot. We'll cover this in greater detail in the next section. What are the elements of plot? Everything from a short story to a novel requires not only the basic elements of a story, but also the same essential elements of a plot. While there are multiple types of plot structure, such as 3-act structure, 5-act structure, hero's journey, all plots have the same elements. Together, these form a story arc. Exposition sets the scene. It's the beginning of the story where we meet our main character and see what their life is like. It also establishes the setting and tone. Rising action. The exposition leads to an event known as the inciting incident. This is the gateway to the rising action. This part of the story contains all of the events that leads to the culmination of all the plot points. We see most of the conflict in this section. Climax. The climax is the height of a story. The character finally faces and usually defeats whatever the major conflict is. Tension builds through the rising actions and peaks at the climax. Stories have more than one climax, depending on the plot structure or if there are 2 different character arcs. Falling action. The falling action is when all the other conflicts or character arcs begin resolving. Anything that isn't addressed in the climax will be addressed in the falling action. Just because the characters have passed the most difficult part of the plot doesn't mean everything is tied up neatly in a bow. Sometimes, the climax causes new conflicts. Resolution or denouement. The end of a story is called the resolution or denouement. All major conflicts are resolved or purposely left open for a cliffhanger or sequel. In many stories, this is where you find the happily ever after. But a resolution doesn't have to be happy. It's the ending of a story arc or plot, and all the questions are answered or intentionally unanswered. How to analyze a short story? Number 1. Read the short story multiple times. Take down important concepts. Number 2. Analyze the plot. Does the plot hold your interest from beginning to end? What are the most important events and why? Is plotline realistic? Are there any parts of the plotline that seem irrelevant to the main story? Does the plot deal with external conflict, internal conflict, or both? What is the moral of the story? Number 3. Analyzing characterization. Wondering how to analyze characters in a short story? The best way is to ask these questions. Who is the protagonist? How effectively does the author describe the character's actions, appearance, and thoughts? What are your feelings towards the characters? Does the way the characters speak give you any information about their personality? Do the characters change throughout the story? If the story contains minor characters, are they necessary and effective? Number 4. Analyzing the setting. How does the author describe the location of the events? Does the story take place in the past, the present, or the future, or all the three? What are the broader circumstances surrounding the story setting? Does the setting play an essential role in the story? Do the place and time in which the author lived and worked affect the location and period in which the story is set? Has the author successfully given you a feeling of really being in the story setting? Number 5. Analyzing themes. Analyzing a theme is your chance to stand out. While some themes are apparent and intended by the author, it is also possible to find more obscure ones. Even the author may not have been aware of them. Answer these questions and you've nailed the theme. What is the central theme? Are there any others? How is the theme conveyed? If the author is using the story to deliver a particular message, are you convinced by it? What does the theme reveal about the author? Number 6. Analyzing point of view. Analyzing the point of view will give a more in-depth insight into all of the previous aspects you have dealt with. So ask yourself, who is narrating the story? Does the author use a consistent point of view? Is the narrator telling the truth? Does the author have the same mindset as the narrator? Would the story be different if it were narrated from another point of view? Number 7. Analyzing the style. What is the author's tone? Humorous? Serious? Sarcastic? Sentimental? Does the author use any unusual words or phrases? What effect do they have? Is there anything in the story, an object, for example, that has any special meaning? Does the author's use of literary devices affect your enjoyment of the story in any way? What would the story be like if the author used a different style? And number 8, put it all together. To get how to write a short story analysis step by step, you have to keep in mind the 2 golden rules. Your essay must be focused on the set question. Your opinions are only valid if you can support them with evidence. Divide your work into 3 sections. Introduction, about 10% of the total word count. Main body, about 80% of the total word count. And conclusion, about 10% of the total word count. Yes, that's it. You're ready to read and analyze the first example of a short story, The Cask of Amontillado, as our next episode. Check our Google Classroom for the quiz.